This is the way. Oh, greetings, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Welcome to a special Mando Vision Bantha Tracks bonus episode, Mando Vision After Dark. But not as sexy as that might sound. I am your host, Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out our small independent Star Wars podcast. We're so glad you're here. Reach out to us on the social media. We're at Mando_Vision on Twitter/X and Instagram. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. That's right, friends. We are back for a bonus episode to kind of follow up with where we left off in the last episode that dropped yesterday, Wednesday the 5th, because that episode sort of morphed into more of a reaction episode of the podcast, where I sort of gave you my reaction to things happening in the first two episodes of Star Wars The Acolyte. And that's all well and good, but we do like to kind of get into some of the nitty-gritty on the podcast here, and that's what this episode is going to be about, because there was a lot to kind of parse through. And after having several conversations with some friends and talking to them about what their concerns were, and kind of going back through and reading some more of the criticisms leveled against the show by other people in the fandom, I thought it bared me coming back, kind of getting into certain aspects of the show, and kind of just having fun with it. Because, again, after recording what I have now terming as a sort of a reaction episode, I went back and I got to rewatch episodes 1 and 2 again, and it was a lot of fun. The beats I remembered well, but there was a couple more details that I picked up on that eluded me in the first viewing, and that's to be expected, I think, especially with something new where you're kind of getting a feel for the way they're telling the story and the way things are unfolding. So going back and watching it again kind of helped me reinforce some ideas of things I wanted to talk about, in particular on this bonus episode. Why is it Mando Vision After Dark? Astute listeners will know that I do these After Dark episodes, and you'll notice my voice is significantly different as I try very, very hard to not wake up my wife, who will come out here and literally cut my head off if I wake her up in the middle of the night to record this, because I'm recording a Star Wars podcast. So we're going to do our best to not get too animated, to not get too fired up. But we got a lot of good stuff to talk about. 3 particular topics, but we'll kind of weave our way through the narrative of these first 2 episodes of The Acolyte, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it, talking about it with you guys, because it's Star Wars. It's a new show. There's a lot of new things in here, but a couple really cool things that I didn't get to talk about in depth in that first episode. So I hope you have fun with this bonus episode, and you know what that means. It's time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go. This is the way. All right, so the first aspect of the 2-part premiere of The Acolyte that I wanted to talk a little bit more in detail about is the sort of backlash that's coming out against what is being described as a cliched story element, and that is the fact that we have what is being termed online as a quote-unquote the evil twin in May. And I think that is completely unfair. Yes. Because I again, this is Star Wars, and it's easy to sort of knock it down to these cliches and these tropes and these various the disparaging things about the story. But I think very strongly we can learn, if not by the end of the first episode, then at least by the end of the second episode, that May in particular has an axe to grind against the Jedi Order. We don't know exactly what it is yet. That is one of the mysteries of the show. But it feels to me like whatever the Jedi did to May, she feels completely justified coming after them and killing them. Now, is killing right? Of course not. But I'm not sure I'm willing to go and say that May is full blown evil. This is Star Wars after all. Redemption stories are part of the narrative. And again, is that going to be the case for May? We don't know. We just don't know that yet. But part of the mystery of the show is what exactly occurred on Braddock 16 years ago when May lost her sister, lost her family, and vice versa for Osha. Osha lost her sister, lost her family. The four Jedi involved, we have Master Soul, Kalnaka, Indira, and Torben. Whatever secret they're keeping, that's the motivation for what May is doing. Again, killing is bad. Don't get me wrong. But whatever these Jedi did, I think is significantly worse because it had spurred May on to this path. Now, they all think May's dead or has been dead for 16 years since whatever happened on Brendock occurred. But I think just calling her the evil twin is reductive and misses the point of what they're going to try and do, what I assume they're going to try and do with this story. Again, you're going to have the two sisters, contrasting elements, one who's trained in the Jedi arts and now one who's being trained in the dark arts of the Sith. So you're going to have that yin and yang. You're going to have that dichotomy between the two. And I think able to explore it more fully by having them be twins, but having very different perspectives. And we really set the table for that in the second episode when Master Saul has the conversation with Oshi about the difference between justice and revenge, much like the title of the episode is. And, Osha's perspective on it is that May killed their family, ruined her life basically, and got her adopted by the Jedi at an older age, the age of 8, so that when she got there, she was in a state of mourning and a state of loss because of the deaths of her family, her sister, and everything she had known. Now, conversely, May has a similar reaction. She thought Osha was dead. Her parents, her family are dead. All that she knew is gone. Now, what happened to May in between or after Brendock, we don't know. So we don't know how she ends up on this path as an acolyte to a warrior of the Sith. And again, one of the elements of the mystery. But to simply call her the evil twin is reductive because I suspect what we're going to find out is the Jedi, these four Jedi, were involved in something quite nefarious. And I can't wait to find out what it is. I don't want to speculate on it at this point. I suspect we'll start getting more clues as the mysteries begin to unravel. Because of the four Jedi that were on Brendock, when May and Osha were children, 2 are already dead, Indira and Torben. We see Indira die at the very beginning of episode 1. We see Torben kill himself, racked over with his guilt of whatever occurred on Brendock, takes his own life. Now, aided by May, of course. But there's a reason why, we don't really see Jedi commit suicide, at least not at this point. And I suspect we'll get more information out of Kalnaka, or at the very least Soul. Now, Soul is one figure that I'm not quite certain will have knowledge of maybe what these other 3 did. Because while Soul seems to bear a lot of weight for Osha's situation, he doesn't seem like he's racked with the sort of guilt that Torben, at the very least, was. And I wonder if Kalnaka is not the same because he seems to have isolated himself in the woods of Kofar. Now, again, we'll get into that speculating a little bit for episode 3. But, again, to sort of attack the story for cliches, as they're being called, I think it's reductive, and I think it's overly simplifying a storyline that I suspect will become much more complicated as time goes on. If you are a longtime listener of this podcast, you know that we are staunch believers that the Jedi Order is full of Bantha poodoo, and this storyline seems to want to expose more of that hypocrisy, more of that sort of arrogance and hubris that the Jedi Order, at least in the time of the Clone Wars, has kind of become known for. And this might be the beginning of sort of their downfall, so that they're in a position that they're in when Palpatine rises to power to kind of put them in check and then have them basically be the masters of their own demise. So again, let's be patient. If you're thinking that, like, oh, it's an evil twin story, I think you're oversimplifying something that's going to be really a strong part of the story as we go on, because I think as we get to see where Osha and May came from, I think it's going to help kind of change our understanding of who they are prior to the Jedi intervening and after the Jedi intervention, and whatever the Jedi did that has set May on this path. So don't get too latched into the idea of it's an evil twin story. Not so fast, my friends. This all leads into the next element that I wanted to talk about today, or tonight, as the case may be, which is what was introduced in Episode 2, the concept of the Barash Vow. Now, if you're a reader of the comic books, that may ring a bell to you, because it took a minute for it to click with me, but I had heard that word before. I had heard that term before, and it goes back to writer Charles Soule's run on the Darth Vader comic, I think back in like 2017 or 18, and he introduced this concept because, well, he introduced the concept for a lot of reasons, but in the story in which it was introduced, it was time for, right after the events of Revenge of the Sith, for Vader to forge his Sith lightsaber, and that meant tracking down a Jedi, killing him, and then bleeding his kyber crystal. Well, right after Order 66, the Jedi were a little hard to come by, weren't they? So he looks for Jedi who are known to have taken the Barash Vow, and it leads him to a Jedi from the era of the High Republic, a guy named Kirik Infilia, if I'm saying that correctly. And they have a knockdown, drag-out brawl for several issues of that comic book. Ultimately, Vader wins, surprise, surprise, and then bleeds his lightsaber, or bleeds his kyber crystal to forge his lightsaber. The Barash Vow is then later expanded upon in the High Republic comic books, specifically in the one called The Blade, which is really good. I do recommend it. You follow a character named Barash Sylvan, and her adopted brother Porter Ingle, who we may remember from Phase 1 of the High Republic books. And Barash is not the first Jedi to take the vow, but because of her, or because of them, I forget, it becomes associated with them. And I checked on this. This is directly from the writer, from Charles Soule himself. He says, "The vow is taken by Jedi who feel they have done something deeply wrong, particularly a misinterpretation of what they believe the Force wanted them to do. And while they don't leave the Order, they decide to sit and listen to the Force until they better understand themselves and what it's saying." So this is clearly what Torben's going through right now. This is why he's in this permanent state of meditation. You know, this is what May takes advantage of. This is the overwhelming guilt that he feels for whatever happened on Brendok. And I think it's really neat that they incorporated this element from the comic books into this series, and specifically because it is a show set in the era of the High Republic. And it's one of those instances of seeing the other creators are paying attention to what's going on in the comic books and in the novels and things like that. And I always find that really engaging, because I think far too often we see things kind of get steamrolled over and disregarded and ignored for the sake of whatever they're trying to tell in the TV shows or in the films. So a lot of the continuity that is created in the comics and in the novels is sometimes thrown out. But this really shows me that they're taking the High Republic publishing initiative very, very seriously, and that Leslie Headland is really paying attention to what the creators of this time period have kind of given her to play with. And the Barash vow, I think, is something very, very interesting, and it says a lot about what possible. I mixed up probably and possibly what possibly occurred on Brendock that set Osha and May on their divergent paths from each other. Uh, they had that expression. It was like a whole little saying they had of their togetherness and how close they were when they were children, before some kind of wedge was driven between them, possibly by the Jedi Order. And it has affected several Jedi, so much so that one has isolated himself on a forest world. I'm referring to Kalnaka on Kofar, and Torben, who's put himself in a state of almost like permanent meditation for 10 plus years. Again, it's a neat element that was brought into the show. It's a neat element from the comic books that was elaborated. Go check it out, Star Wars, The High Republic, The Blade. It's a 4-issue miniseries. Get your digital copy on Amazon. You can read on your tablet, on your phone. Check it out. Good story. And check out that Vader thing too. The Charles Soule's run on Vader was really good. There have been some ups and downs in Vader's comic book over the years, but Charles Soule was definitely an up. So go check his stuff out with Vader. Very, very good stuff. So seeing that element in there says a lot about what happened on Brendock and what put May on her path, as opposed to just being, born evil, which apparently is what people are reducing her down to already. No. Not that simple. There's a lot more going on here, and I can't wait to find out more about it. Again, there's multiple mysteries on this show so far. So don't get wrapped up in the one where you're like, oh, who's the mysterious Sith Lord? If you're waiting for the Plagius or somebody to show up, like that I feel like that's they want you to look over there at that. Meanwhile, they're giving you another mystery right in front of your face. It's way more compelling to me, which is the Jedi doing bad things, being hypocrites, being an institution that is failing, that is beginning to crack under the weight of its hubris and arrogance to an extent. And again, watch the action of the Jedi in these 2 episodes. There are moments for Soul, for Yord, where they just kind of do things with the Force, where you're like, oh, that didn't seem cool. Didn't seem Jedi-like to me. And we're here for that on this podcast. We like exploring the failings of the Jedi. It's become one of my favorite pastimes over the years. I don't know why, but it's really one of those elements of Star Wars that I'm really fascinated with nowadays. I think particularly because when I was a kid, I think your ideal of the Jedi was that they were like the ultimate kind of like warrior monks, and they could do no wrong. But the truth is far from what our perception of them was. And as we get to explore more of that, I just have more fun seeing them kind of take that tumble, I suppose. Not that they're all bad guys necessarily, but the weight that they put on themselves to be the administrators of right and wrong in the galaxy. It's no small task for anyone, let alone beings who we are finding out are far from infallible. So an element I really want to see explored in this series, and so far so good on that front. Another aspect of it that I did want to talk about some Jedi stuff, and these are small little musings of mine, and then we're going to get out of here and wrap up this little bonus show. 2 things I noticed. Well, one was not more than a notice. One was pretty obvious. But the first thing I noticed was, particularly with Master Soul and with Yord Fondar, they're wearing gloves. I thought that was very strange to me. I'm not quite sure if it has something to do with like the environments that they're in or whatnot, but maybe there's just when they're on that cold planet, they're like, oh, gloves make sense. But I'd never seen anything like that before. and I could have sworn I saw Yord wearing them when they're on Olega, but I could be mistaken about that. It's just one of those kind of weird visual things that, you know, when you use the expression like feeling the force and things like that, you know, it gives you the idea of something tactile. So the idea of Jedi wearing gloves is something new to me. And again, like if it's for the cold weather um, of Karlak, that's one thing. But it's not like they're wearing winter parkas or anything like that either. So I don't know, just kind of a curiosity, an observation. What do you think? Did you like the gloves? You like your Jedi with the gloves on? Tell me what you think. And um, I, I would be a little remiss if I didn't bring up Yord's yellow lightsaber. And again, this might be a personal musing of mine, but I'm not quite sure how I feel about Yord having a yellow lightsaber. Um, since the new Disney canon, and if I say anything out of line here, please hit me up and tell me that I've missed something. Uh, we've only seen in canon, the canon that counts, not stuff from Legends or the old expanded universe any longer. We've only seen Rey with a yellow lightsaber at the end of Rise of Skywalker. In the current Star Wars comics, Luke has a yellow lightsaber that he finds at an old abandoned Jedi temple from the era of the High Republic. So that does make Yord having a yellow lightsaber make sense. But I think my rub with it, my issue, and it's not even an issue. This is like a nitpick. Is that it kind of bums me out a little bit because, you know, it's not very George Lucas esque, and maybe that's just me being a George Lucas kind of guy, but I always liked that George was like, no, it's red and blue and or green and blue for Jedi, red for the Sith, you know, and then Mace got his purple one, um, and in Legends they gave each of the colors was sort of assigned a meaning and sort of a role for the Jedi who had those colors, and that I feel like that's kind of gone away. If anyone knows any more about that, please point it out to me because again, maybe there's something I'm missing. So the idea of a yellow lightsaber is interesting enough to me that I want to know what it means in this era, in this time period. And again, I'm reading these books in the High Republic, but I'll be honest, my memory is not as good as it used to be. I have I have the books from 30 years ago. They're like locked in a steel trap that is my brain. But new stuff, I have a hard time retaining that. So if I've missed something about the yellow blades, point it out to me. Let me know what I'm forgetting. But it is interesting. It's an interesting choice. I don't know how I feel about it personally. Maybe I'll get used to it. Maybe I just have to see it a little bit more frequently. But I'd like to know if it had a certain meaning to it. I think at one point in the old in the old expanded universe mythology, the yellow blade was like for reformed Sith or something along those lines. Um, I don't remember. I don't think that's stuck in any way to new canon, but I'm definitely curious about it. And I think that's basically it for you tonight, my friends, for this episode of Mandovision After Dark. And I thank you so much for sticking around and hanging out with me. And let me know what you're thinking about these first two episodes of The Acolyte, because I want to hear about it. I want to hear what you think. Hit me up on the socials at Mando_Vision on Twitter/X and Instagram. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert, if you're interested and so inclined. Sweet 5-star reviews. They really help small independent shows like us stand out and not get lost in the shuffle. This is the Mandovision Podcast. I am your host, Nargai Tom, and I thank you so much for being here with me tonight for this Bantha Tracks bonus episode, Mandovision After Dark, where we get a little bit more into some of the details of the first two episodes of Star Wars, The Acolyte, and I can't wait to see what's next. Just a little programming note. I'll keep you guys posted as it gets a little bit closer, but there will be one episode, I believe it's episode 5, that will be at least one day late getting released because I will not be anywhere near my laptop when that episode drops. So give me 24 to 48 hours. But I'll remind you about that one in another week or two. All right. Go out. Be great Star Wars fans. I'll talk to you guys next week. And remember, this podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.